the Volcanic Seven Summits, a legendary achievement and the dream of serious mountaineers to climb the highest volcano on each continent. But not all of them are created equal. Some are gentle treks that nearly anyone can do. Others are frozen, remote, and deadly, demanding tens of thousands of dollars, weeks of brutal effort, and a fair amount of luck just to survive. Today we are ranking all 7 of the highest volcanoes on each continent to find out which one is the easiest, the deadliest, the cheapest, and the one only the rich dare to climb. Only around 80 people have ever completed the full circuit. To put it another way, far more people have been to space than have climbed the highest volcano on every continent. You wouldn't guess what it takes to climb the 4th volcano on this list, and the facts about number 2 will definitely surprise you too. At the end, you'll find out exactly how much it would cost to climb them all. Let's begin. We start in Oceania. Deep in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, the first volcano on this list barely looks like a volcano at all. Mount Giluwe rises 4,368 meters, or 14,331 feet, making it the highest volcano in Oceania. Strangely, it is not even the highest mountain in Papua New Guinea. Nearby, Mount Wilhelm beats it by just 141 meters. Technically, Giluwe is the easiest of the Volcanic Seven Summits. There are no glaciers to cross, no fixed ropes, and no serious technical climbing. The summit itself is reached mostly by hiking, with only a short scramble near the top. But getting there is a different story. The approach crosses dense rainforest, rivers, boggy grasslands, and some extremely wet terrain. There are no cable cars, mountain huts, or developed trails. Everything has to come in with you, usually carried by local guides and porters. And that makes Giluwe surprisingly expensive for such a straightforward climb. Current guided expeditions can cost roughly $4,000 to $6,000, mostly because of the transport and logistics involved in reaching such a remote part of Papua New Guinea. There is no reliable record of total ascents, and I could not find a documented climbing fatality on Giluwe. That combination of modest altitude, non-technical terrain, and almost non-existent accident history is why it starts at number 7. And Giluwe once looked nothing like it does today. Its summit is now covered mainly in wet alpine grassland, but during the Ice Age, the volcano supported the largest glaciated area known in Papua New Guinea. Glaciers descended more than 1,000 vertical meters below the summit, and some valleys contained ice hundreds of meters thick. Today, all of it is gone, so you are climbing a tropical grass-covered volcano through rain and mud across terrain that was once buried beneath an enormous equatorial ice cap. Giluwe may be remote, wet, and surprisingly expensive, but when it comes to the actual climbing, it is still the clear easiest of the Volcanic Seven Summits. From the remote highlands of Papua New Guinea, we now travel west to Africa. The next volcano is technically almost as easy, but the scale is completely different. Around 50,000 people attempt it every year, and that sheer volume means climbers die here every season, despite the route requiring virtually no technical climbing. Kilimanjaro is what happens when a mountain nearly 6,000 meters high is turned into a trek. At 5,895 meters, or 19,341 feet, it is the highest volcano in Africa, and one of only 2 mountains that appear on both the Volcanic Seven Summits and the regular 7 summits. Yet on the normal routes, there is no rock climbing, no glacier travel, and almost no technical mountaineering at all. You simply walk, and that is exactly why so many people underestimate it. Around 50,000 climbers attempt Kilimanjaro every year, making it by far one of the busiest mountains in either challenge. They begin in warm rainforest, climb through moorland and alpine desert, and within a few days arrive in an Arctic summit zone surrounded by ice. Despite standing only a few hundred kilometers from the equator, there are several established routes. Morang is the only major one with huts, while Machame and Lemosho are longer and generally allow more time to acclimatize. And that extra time is important because altitude is responsible for most of the difficulty here. A major study followed 1,237 recreational climbers. Almost 88% reached the summit, but 8.6% developed severe altitude-related symptoms, and more than 1% became sick enough to require hospital treatment. That is the strange thing about Kilimanjaro. The terrain is easy enough that someone with no mountaineering experience can book an expedition, but your body still has to survive nearly 6 kilometers above sea level, and almost anyone really does try. In 2019, Anne Lorimore reached the summit at 89 years old, setting the Guinness World Record for the oldest person to climb Kilimanjaro. A reputable 7 or 8 day expedition currently costs roughly $2,800 to $3,000, while premium operators can charge twice that. There is no reliable lifetime death total, but climbers die here almost every year from altitude illness, medical emergencies, and exposure, and the sheer volume of attempts means a technically straightforward volcano still produces a significant number of rescues and fatalities. So Kilimanjaro sits at number 6 because almost everything about the climb is designed to make it accessible. Guides, porters, established camps, well-used trails, and an extremely high summit success rate. But none of that changes the one thing Kilimanjaro cannot make easier. At the top, you are still standing at 5,895 meters above sea level. From the crowded slopes of Kilimanjaro, we now travel north into Asia to the mountains of Iran. The next volcano is similarly straightforward in summer, but its summit is surrounded by sulfur deposits and active fumaroles, releasing volcanic gases, directly above the place where Persian mythology says a monstrous tyrant has been chained for centuries. Mount Damavand rises above northern Iran as an almost perfect volcanic cone, close enough to Tehran to be visible from the capital on clear days. At roughly 5,610 meters, or 18,400 feet, it is Iran's highest mountain and the Asia's highest volcanic summit. And in summer, climbing it is surprisingly straightforward. The normal southern route requires no technical rock climbing and no roped glacier travel. Climbers usually reach Barga Sevam at around 4,200 meters, then make one long summit push over increasingly barren volcanic terrain. But near the top, Damavand finally reminds you that you are standing on a volcano. The summit crater is roughly 150 meters wide. Inside it is a small frozen lake, while nearby fumaroles release sulfur-rich gases from beneath the mountain. During one scientific visit, a vent on the crater rim was measured at around 50 degrees Celsius. So at more than 5.5 kilometers above sea level, you can stand beside hot volcanic gas while looking down at a frozen crater lake. The mountain is dormant rather than extinct. Its last known eruption happened roughly 7,000 years ago, but hot springs still exist on its flanks and sulfur continues to collect around the summit. And winter is much less forgiving than summer. There is no reliable public record of total ascents or lifetime climbing deaths, so any precise fatality rate you see online should be treated with suspicion. But Damavand is surprisingly cheap. A current 6-day guided program costs around 630 euros, and the climbing permit itself is only about $50. Then there is the reason this mountain has mattered to Iranians for far longer than mountaineering has existed. In Persian mythology, the monstrous tyrant Zahak was defeated and chained inside Mount Damavand. According to the legend, he remains imprisoned beneath it until the end of time, when he will eventually break free, which makes those sulfur fumes near the summit slightly more interesting. Damavand sits at number 5 because during summer it is still fundamentally a non-technical high-altitude climb. But compared with the more organized mountains below it, you have less infrastructure, a harsher winter environment, and a summit where the volcano itself is still visibly breathing. From the sulfur-covered summit of Damavand, we now travel all the way south to Antarctica. The next volcano is lower, colder, and far more isolated, so remote that the climb itself is almost secondary to the challenge of simply reaching the mountain. A current expedition costs more than $77,000 per person, and only a tiny number of climbers have ever stood on top. Mount Sidley is only 4,285 meters, or 14,058 feet high. That makes it lower than Kilimanjaro, Damavand, and even Mount Giluwe, yet climbing it currently costs $77,250 per person. And the reason becomes obvious when you look at where it is. Sidley rises from Marie Byrd Land, deep in the interior of West Antarctica, hundreds of kilometers from any permanent base. Climbers first fly from Chile to Union Glacier, then transfer to a ski-equipped aircraft for another flight deep into the continent. Everything, people, food, fuel, and equipment, has to arrive by air. The actual climbing is rated only strenuous, not extreme. The upper mountain contains blue ice, steep snow, and enormous wind-sculpted formations, but technically, Sidley is nowhere near the hardest volcano on this list. What makes it extraordinary is how little climbing history it has. The first known ascent happened only in 1990, when New Zealander Bill Atkinson climbed it while working as a field assistant for volcanologists. Then, another 21 years passed before the first non-government expedition reached the top. That 2011 team landed on the ice about 16 kilometers from the summit, skied for 7 hours just to establish camp, and then spent 13 hours climbing around the crater rim. At one point, they thought they had reached the summit, only to notice another point several meters higher farther along the rim, and that crater is enormous. It stretches roughly 5 kilometers or 3 miles across, with a caldera wall around 1,200 meters high, almost 4 times the height of the Eiffel Tower. By early 2025, one detailed independent register contained only 110 individual climbers who had reached Sidley. Even after additional expeditions in 2025 and 2026, it remains one of the least climbed major mountains on Earth. And despite all that isolation, I could not find a documented climbing fatality here. That is exactly why Sidley stops in the middle of the ranking. If something goes badly wrong, you are in one of the worst possible places on Earth for it to happen. But almost nobody attempts Sidley casually. The enormous price and logistics effectively filter the mountain down to experienced climbers supported by professional polar teams. So Sidley is not exceptionally deadly. It is simply exceptionally difficult to even stand beneath. From the frozen isolation of Antarctica, we now travel north to South America. The next volcano is the complete opposite of Sidley, far easier to reach, but almost 2,600 meters higher. It rises from the Atacama Desert to nearly 6,900 meters, making it the highest volcano on Earth. Ojos del Salado, at 6,893 meters or 22,615 feet, rises from the Atacama Desert on the border between Chile and Argentina, higher than almost every mountain outside Asia. And despite that enormous altitude, Ojos is not especially technical. On the Chilean side, four-wheel drive vehicles can reach around 5,800 meters. From there, most of the normal route is a high-altitude trek over volcanic rock, scree, and snow, with only a short exposed rock section immediately below the summit. But Ojos takes this accessibility to a ridiculous extreme. In 2023, a specially modified Porsche was driven to 6,721 meters on the volcano. That is only 172 vertical meters below the summit, and remains the world record for the highest altitude ever reached by a car. The problem is that your lungs cannot take the same shortcut. At almost 6,900 meters, the expedition normally takes around 2 weeks because climbers need to acclimatize gradually. A current 14-day guided trip costs about $3,980. And this strange accessibility has turned Ojos into a playground for altitude records. Cars, motorcycles, and other vehicles have repeatedly been taken absurdly high on its slopes because the Atacama is so dry and the terrain so open that machines can reach elevations that would be completely impossible on most mountains this size. But the strangest story happened at the summit itself. Ojos has 2 rocky summit towers about 60 meters apart, and for decades climbers argued over which was actually higher. So in 2003, a team carried 15 kilograms of surveying equipment all the way to nearly 6,900 meters to settle it. The difference? Just 54 centimeters, plus or minus 5, less than the length of your arm. That is why Ojos sits this high on the list. The route is surprisingly straightforward for a mountain this enormous, but at nearly 6,900 meters, it does not need technical climbing to become dangerous. The altitude does most of the work. From the extreme altitude of Ojos del Salado, we now travel north across the Americas to Mexico. The next volcano is more than 1,200 meters lower, but considerably more technical. Its normal route crosses a steep glacier where one mistake can become fatal, and where bodies lost more than half a century ago have started emerging from the ice. Pico de Orizaba is where this list stops being a trek and starts feeling like real mountaineering. At 5,636 meters or 18,491 feet, it is Mexico's highest mountain and the highest volcano in North America. The standard route begins from the Piedra Grande Hut, crosses an area called the Labyrinth, and then reaches the Jamapa Glacier, From there, climbers use crampons and an ice axe on sustained snow and ice. That glacier is exactly why Orizaba ranks above the much higher Ojos del Salado. Here, one bad step on hard ice can become an uncontrolled fall, and the mountain has a very visible history of proving that point. In 2015, climbers spotted a head and a hand sticking out of the glacier. Rescuers later uncovered 2 mummified bodies, believed to be climbers lost in a 1959 avalanche. The ice had held them for more than half a century before slowly exposing them again. Recent accidents are not rare either. 4 climbers died in a single fall in 2023. In 2025, rescuers recorded 1 death, 7 serious accidents, and several lost groups. Local guided programs generally cost around $1,500 to $2,500, while a current 9-day expedition combining Orizaba with acclimatization climbs costs $4,300. The summit itself is dramatic. Its crater measures roughly 400 by 500 meters, and the floor drops about 300 meters below the highest rim. But people were fascinated by this volcano long before modern mountaineering existed. Its Nahuatl name, Quetzaltépetl, means Star Mountain. Aztec settlements, temples, and pyramids have been found around its lower slopes, and the volcano itself even appears in Aztec hieroglyphics. So Orizaba sits this high because it combines serious altitude with something the volcanoes below it mostly lack: technical consequences. You need real glacier skills, and when conditions turn bad, one mistake can become fatal very quickly. From the steep glacier of Pico de Orizaba, we now cross the Atlantic to Europe and the Caucasus Mountains. The final volcano looks strangely accessible, with cable cars, heated huts, and snowcats carrying climbers high onto its slopes. Yet despite all that infrastructure, it has the darkest fatality record on this list. And in July 2026 alone, 6 climbers died here. Elbrus is the deadliest volcano on this list for a strange reason. It looks almost easy. At 5,642 meters, or 18,510 feet, it is the highest mountain in Europe and one of only 2 peaks that appear on both the regular and Volcanic 7 summits. The normal southern route is rated only 1B in the Russian system, essentially entry-level mountaineering. Cable cars carry climbers high onto the mountain. There are huts along the route, and current local expeditions even advertise it as suitable for the average person. A 9-day guided climb currently starts at around $1,220, making Elbrus one of the cheapest major summits in either challenge. But above all, that infrastructure is an enormous, almost featureless glacier. And when the weather changes, the mountain can become completely unrecognizable. A Russian mountaineering historian has recorded 167 climber deaths between 1933 and 2025. 46 happened in the last 10 years alone, and the bodies of 33 climbers were never recovered. And 2026 has already added at least 6 more. On July 6th, a climber died at around 5,500 meters. Then, less than 3 weeks later, a 7-person Bosnian team was caught in a violent storm. 2 were rescued, the other 5 died high on the mountain. Elbrus has a long history of humans trying to tame it. During World War II, German mountain troops climbed both summits and planted Nazi flags there. Months later, Soviet military climbers returned in brutal winter conditions, tore them down, and replaced them with Soviet flags. And the mountain itself is still technically a volcano. Its last known eruption occurred around 50 AD, and hot springs and weak volcanic gases still exist on its flanks. That is why Elbrus finishes at the deadly end of this list. It is not the highest, it is not the most technical, and it is nowhere near the most remote. But its cheap price, easy access, and apparently simple route put huge numbers of people onto a 5,600-meter glacier, where a sudden whiteout can remove almost every reference point around you. Elbrus looks manageable. Its death record says otherwise. So, how much would summiting all 7 volcanoes realistically cost? Adding up the expedition prices we looked at, even the lower-end options come to roughly $92,000. And almost $80,000 of that is Mount Sidley alone. Realistically, completing the entire Volcanic 7 Summits challenge would cost well over $100,000. It is a massive effort physically, logistically, and financially, and considering only around 80 people have ever completed it, It remains one of the most exclusive mountaineering challenges on Earth. Let me know in the comments which volcano surprised you the most, or which one you would actually attempt first. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.